They told her she wasn't strong enough to haul heavy machinery, that she didn't belong in their world of steel and torque. But the next day, she crashed their party in a 70-ton tank. Who really deserves to be behind the wheel? The sun beat down on the industrial yard of Elite Heavy Haul, where chrome shined brighter than experience and confidence passed for competence. A red and white banner hung over the chain-link entrance. America's finest heavy haul team, precision, power, prestige. Engines growled in the background like caged beasts, and young, tanned men in designer boots leaned against multi-axle rigs, talking loud and laughing louder. Through that gate walked Jenna McDonald, 39 years old, posture like steel. Her brown hair, styled in a practical shoulder-length cut, was loosely tucked beneath her plain cap. Her olive skin bore the wear of wind, sun, and grit. She wore work jeans, scuffed boots, and a black t-shirt with fading white letters, Iron Wheel, 107th Armored Logistics. On her back, a canvas duffel bag held her certifications, references, and a folded flag. She stopped at the reception trailer and met the first obstacle. A gum-snapping receptionist with acrylic nails and an attitude that didn't match the job title. "You here for dispatch?" she asked without looking up. "No, ma'am. Driver position. Heavy haul." The receptionist looked up, blinked, then smirked. "You mean like those?" She gestured out the window toward a row of triple-lift lowboys and heavy-duty semis. "Yes, I'm fully certified. M1 Abrams, M1070 HET's mobile bridge layers. I'd like to speak to whoever's running your transport division." Moments later, Jenna stood in a makeshift conference room across from Russ Kempler, 41, sunglasses propped on his manicured head, button-up shirt unbuttoned just enough to expose a golden Elite Heavy Haul medallion. Behind him on the wall, framed photos of oversized equipment, windmill blades, refinery columns, and one poorly lit image of a rig stuck in mud. Russ scanned her resume with all the seriousness of someone reading a cereal box. "Army, huh? Appreciate your service. But we operate real hauls here. Modular transporters, 9-line configurations, turbine decks. I hauled battle tanks through combat zones under fire," Jenna said, arms crossed. "I've driven on roads that didn't exist 24 hours earlier. I can load, unload, anchor, and maintain, blindfolded if needed." Russ laughed, sliding her folder aside. "Yeah, see, that's the thing. We're not looking for a publicity stunt. Media's real sensitive right now. We can't risk a PR bomb if something goes wrong. Insurance gets nervous. You think I'm a liability? I think you're an unknown. And frankly, we've got guys waiting 6 months just to touch a Goldman trailer. Can't hand the keys to just anyone who comes here saying they know how to fly a rocket." Jenna reached into her bag and placed a laminated photo on the table. Her, behind the wheel of an M1070, towing a tank across a collapsed bridge with her unit standing atop it, watching her make it across. He didn't even look at it, already focused on something on his phone. "Tell you what, let's do a little test. We've got a lowboy outside, needs to be repositioned. Let's see if you can even hitch it." They led her out to the lot, where a pristine Kenworth W990, all black with silver trim, waited next to a massive lowboy trailer. Jenna nodded with quiet familiarity. She'd seen heavier, scarier, and dirtier, but this was home turf. Russ handed her a clipboard and a key. 10 minutes, he said. Around them, a few drivers gathered to watch, whispering and laughing. One recorded on his phone. Jenna stepped into the cab and immediately felt it. The air pressure gauge was flatlining. She tapped the brakes. No hiss, no resistance. "Something's wrong with the system," she called out. Russ waved from a distance. "It's fine, just old lines. Do your thing." She knew better. Something had been disabled, likely capped at the air tanks. If she moved the rig like this even an inch, she could jackknife or shear off the landing gear. She climbed back out. "This isn't safe. The brake lines are off." A lanky, smirking driver named Troy walked over. "Maybe the Army forgot to teach you where the pedal is?" Russ laughed. "Maybe she's just nervous. Go on, Jenna. Show us that battlefield magic." But she didn't move. She stood there, scanning the trailer, watching the eyes around her. None friendly. None fair. She understood now. This wasn't a test. It was a setup. She handed back the clipboard. I won't put my name on a death trap. Russ took it with a smug grin. That's too bad. Maybe heavy haul's just not for everyone. As she turned to leave, someone muttered, should have tried nursing school. Another chuckled, tell her there's a tank out back. Maybe she'll wake up. She didn't flinch, didn't fire back. But she paused at the gate, then turned just enough to make eye contact with Russ. I've moved equipment across battlefields, deserts, frozen rivers, and enemy lines. I know every inch of these machines, how they breathe. You don't respect that? Fine. You'll remember me anyway. And with that, she walked through the gate and out of the yard. She drove her old pickup down the highway, past the shining rigs of the company that mocked her, past the town that forgot what grit looked like, past every civilian job ad that said, must be willing to learn, but never meant it. She had a plan, and soon they'd see exactly who they turned away. The morning after her humiliation at the elite heavy haul depot, Jenna McDonald stood barefoot in her garage, surrounded by echoes of another life. Her modest home sat at the edge of a small town outside the city, just beyond the clamor of industrial noise but close enough that the low rumble of passing semis still reached her porch. The walls of the garage were lined with faded photographs, convoys stretching across desert horizons, night operations under green-lit goggles, and soldiers smiling in the dust with grease-stained uniforms. One wall held a shadow box with her Medal of Valor, awarded during a rescue operation after her lead vehicle was struck in Iraq. Below it hung her old name patch, Iron Wheel, a nickname earned for keeping convoys rolling even when the odds begged them not to. The centerpiece of the space was a scale model of the M1070 HET, her Army workhorse, now dust-covered and missing one axle. She wiped a finger across its hood, then turned toward a small shelf with paperwork. From it, she pulled a tablet. Jenna sat at her workbench and opened a browser, hands steady as stone. On the screen, a live stream began loading. Elite Heavy Haul's Investor Showcase, complete with cheap digital fanfare and camera drones swooping over the depot she'd just been thrown out of. The video cut to the main stage, where Russ Kempler stood grinning behind a podium. Today, he said, we're proud to unveil our largest load to date, a custom-built mining hauler headed to a Nevada lithium operation. This contract puts us on the global map. And for those who doubted our edge, we're just getting started. The crowd of executives and young drivers cheered, clapping hard and loud. Russ continued, bragging about fleet size and capabilities while gesturing toward the bright yellow Bearing TX 500 mining hauler behind him. An absolute beast on wheels, designed to transport 300 tons of raw material in harsh terrain. But Russ didn't know what Jenna knew. She paused the stream, rewound, and zoomed in on a small banner tucked in the corner of the event, sponsored by the Veteran Mobility Investment Fund. She narrowed her eyes. That fund had helped finance several companies after her retirement, and she had signed off on their early grants. Curious, she opened a folder from the lockbox and flipped through records until she found it. Elite Heavy Haul, Investment Class B 3.2% equity stake. She wasn't just a rejected job applicant. She was still a legal minority owner. It hit her like a gear snapping into place. They had built their image on strength, grit, and American muscle, yet they had rejected the most qualified driver to ever walk through their gates, and now stood on her shoulders without knowing it. For a moment, she just stared at the paused screen. Russ, smiling. Drivers cheering. Investors nodding. They thought they had won. Jenna stood, walked into the kitchen, and poured herself a black coffee. She picked up a notebook and began writing names. That afternoon, Jenna changed out of her home clothes and into an old olive green field jacket from her last deployment. The fabric was worn but solid. On her shoulder, the fading patch of the 107th Armored Logistics Battalion. She slipped on military-grade boots, slung her duffel over her shoulder, and stepped outside. She drove her pickup to a remote location on the outskirts of the city, the Regional Veterans Heritage Museum, which sat behind a security gate and an old Air Force transport plane. It was half museum, half forgotten warehouse of decommissioned equipment. many of which Jenna had helped transport some years ago. She parked near a corrugated hangar and walked through a side door. Inside, the space buzzed with fluorescent lights and nostalgia. Rusted jeeps, half-disassembled generators, and a decommissioned M1 Abrams tank rested in the shadows like sleeping giants. "Jenna McDonald," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Sergeant Ray Salinas, 60s, white mustache, worn hands, her former motor pool supervisor and now caretaker of the museum. "I heard you were back," he said. "Didn't think you'd be here this fast." "They crossed the line, Ray," she said, voice low, "and I think it's time I reminded them how steel really moves." Ray nodded slowly, chewing his cheek. "You're not thinking of stealing it, are you?" "No," Jenna said. "I'm asking for a favor. The military owes me nothing. But I owe something to every woman, every vet, every driver they mocked yesterday." Ray sighed and reached into a desk drawer. He pulled out a small key. "She's not active duty. She's a demo unit, retrofitted for parade display. But the engine's real. She's fueled, greased, just waiting for a reason." Jenna looked at the tank. Matte green paint chipped at the edges, treads resting like coiled muscles. "She's beautiful," Jenna whispered. Ray stepped closer. "Don't make me regret this." "You won't." As night fell, Jenna rolled the garage door open and climbed inside the belly of the tank. Dust rose around her. Her hands, steady as ever, moved over controls she hadn't touched in years. She powered up the systems, feeling the engine cough to life beneath her. The M1 Abrams interior hummed as lights flickered on, dim, red-lit panels wrapping around her like an armored cocoon. She strapped into the command seat, placed her hand on the throttle, and whispered, "Let's show them what a real haul looks like." From outside, the moon reflected off the tank's turret as the diesel engine growled deeper into the night. Jenna McDonald wasn't done, and silence was no longer part of the plan. The sun rose bright and unforgiving over the elite heavy haul depot. The company had rolled out the red carpet, literally, for their biggest day yet. Red, white, and blue bunting fluttered in the dry breeze. Polished semis gleamed in formation, and a makeshift stage stood tall in front of their new crown jewel, the Bearing TX 500 mining hauler, parked like a trophy beside the main warehouse. Executives in sharp suits mingled with politicians, investors, and influencers, young, camera-ready types, eager to tag the next symbol of American grit on social media. Music blared from speakers. Laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses filled the air. And Russ Kempler, the company's smug operations director, was already 5 minutes into another self-congratulatory speech. Elite Heavy Haul is proud to announce our expansion into military logistics, spaceport modules, and high-security payloads, he said, pacing the stage, his microphone echoing across the depot. "We believe in strength, discipline, and innovation, values we've embodied from day one, and today proves it." Behind him, a giant LED screen flashed graphics of mining equipment, contract logos, and the words, "The future of heavy transport starts here." The crowd applauded on cue. Cameras panned over the executives. The press took notes. Drone cameras hovered in the air, beaming the event live to thousands. And then a low rumble. Faint, wrong, out of place. Russ paused, laughed nervously. "Must be one of our drivers doing an early loadout. Don't worry. Trucks around here like to remind us who's boss." But the sound grew louder, deeper. Then it hit. A deafening roar of diesel and steel shattered the morning. From the far end of the depot, the front gate exploded inward as if struck by a god. The crowd screamed. Cameras jerked toward the source. And through a cloud of dust and splinters, it emerged. A military-grade M1 Abrams tank, painted in flat green, engine snarling like a beast uncaged, treads ripping across the concrete with terrifying weight. It crushed the decorative elite sign underfoot like it was paper. One of the drone cameras spiraled out of control and crashed. Staff fled the stage, tripping over chairs and tables. The tank rolled forward, unstoppable, until it skidded to a halt just 10 feet from the new mining hauler. The depot went dead silent. Even the wind held its breath. The hatch at the top of the turret creaked open, and from within rose Jenna McDonald, standing tall in full military uniform, field jacket pressed, boots laced, her hair tied back tight beneath a camouflage cap bearing her battalion insignia. Her eyes scanned the crowd calm, unblinking, her expression unreadable. She held a small, folded paper in one hand, and in the other, a dog tag, glinting in the sunlight. A wave of confusion rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised. Live streams exploded with activity. Russ Kempler, ghost pale now, stumbled forward and barked, "This is private property. This is a federal crime." But before he could continue, the sound of sirens pierced the air, followed by the rumble of military convoy vehicles pulling up behind the tank. Humvees, black Suburbans, 2 armored personnel carriers. The lead vehicle parked, and its door opened. Out stepped General Lionel Wilson, 4-star general and deputy director of Military Logistics Command. Decorated, feared, respected. A hush fell so hard that even the birds stopped chirping. The general walked calmly to the front of the crowd, ignoring the wide-eyed Russ, and looked directly at Jenna. She nodded once. Then he turned to the cameras and spoke. "As of this moment, Elite Heavy Haul is being removed from all federal defense contracts," General Wilson announced. His voice was steady, commanding. "Effective immediately." Gasps spread like fire. "This decision was not made lightly," he continued, "but we have uncovered evidence of sabotage, discrimination against military veterans, and falsified capability claims. Our investigation has been thorough. Our conclusion is final. This company has shown incompetence, dishonor, and a complete lack of respect for the people who have carried this nation on their backs." Russ tried to step forward. "This is insane. We've done nothing wrong." Wilson cut him off with a glare that could crush bone. "You sabotaged a veteran's application. You mocked her service. You built a brand off strength you don't possess. And you left the woman who commanded convoys in a war zone standing in your parking lot, humiliated, while you drank espresso and called her a liar." Jenna remained motionless atop the tank, eyes fixed on Russ. Finally, she raised the piece of paper. It was her service record, the same document they had refused to read. And then she spoke. "I've moved fuel convoys under mortar fire, hauled tanks through flood zones, pulled broken rigs out of canyons in pitch-black nights. But nothing, not a war zone, not a sandstorm, ever insulted me like you did when you said, 'You don't look the type.'" The crowd stood frozen. She held up the dog tag. "This belonged to my driver in Fallujah. He didn't make it home, but I did. And I'll be damned if I let you spit on his memory for a bonus check." The silence broke into thunderous applause. A woman near the front wiped tears from her eyes. A group of veterans near the back raised their fists in solidarity. Cameras rolled. The internet watched in real time. The general stepped forward again. "To the press. This tank was retrieved and operated with full permission from the Veterans Heritage Museum. Ms. McDonald has not broken any laws. In fact, her conduct today may have just saved us from putting trust in the wrong hands." Russ Kempler, red-faced and speechless, stood surrounded by flashing lights and stares of disbelief. The general turned to Jenna. "Ms. McDonald, do you have anything else to say?" Jenna scanned the crowd. Then, slowly, deliberately, she said, "I didn't come here for revenge. I came to reclaim respect. Not just mine, but every veteran, every woman, every underdog who's been told they don't belong in the driver's seat." The applause surged again, this time louder, fuller. She climbed down from the tank, boots clanking on the steel hull, and walked past Russ without looking at him. Behind her, the once pristine depot now looked like a movie set after a war scene. But to Jenna, it had never looked more honest. The storm had arrived, and it had tread marks. By the following week, the headlines had taken a clear side. Veteran exposes corruption in elite trucking firm. Tank commander turns the tide in logistics industry. Shareholder shock. Woman behind M1 Abrams reveals legal leverage. Social media was ablaze. The video of Jenna atop the Abrams tank had gone viral, viewed tens of millions of times. On forums and radio shows, truckers were calling her a hero. Veterans organizations flooded her inbox with support. Even late-night shows joked about the incident, but always with respect. Behind the scenes, Jenna had moved quickly. She wasn't just a symbol, she was a strategist. Years ago, while recovering from a deployment injury, Jenna had taken the advice of a mentor and invested part of her Army pension into a veterans fund. That fund had quietly acquired minority shares in several logistics firms, including Elite Heavy Haul. And though the shares were non-controlling, the events at the depot had changed the game. The public pressure was unrelenting. Key clients, energy companies, aerospace contractors, and even the Department of Transportation had threatened to pull contracts unless leadership changed. That gave Jenna leverage. Inside a conference room lined with glass and tension, the remaining board of Elite Heavy Haul convened for an emergency meeting. Jenna arrived in a gray suit, not a uniform. Calm, steady, and carrying a thick binder of documents, including a motion to force a leadership vote. Russ Kempler wasn't there. He'd been escorted out days ago, pending federal investigation. A union representative, 2 major investors, and a client liaison sat across from her. One by one, they cast their votes. The old guard lost. Badly. Jenna stood slowly, thanking the board members, and made a call from her flip notebook. Within the hour, the remaining shares were bought out, not by a single person, but by a new collective trust she had arranged with the help of a Veterans Legal Alliance and an independent team of logistics consultants. Elite Heavy Haul was no more. It was reborn that same day as Iron Wheel Logistics. The name was her old call sign, but the company wouldn't revolve around her. It would revolve around principles: fairness, skill, and grit, not privilege, nepotism, or PR games. She entered the main lot that afternoon to face the remaining employees. Some skeptical, some ashamed, some hopeful. Most had seen the live stream. Many had worked under fear and favoritism for years. A few who had once mocked her now kept their eyes down. Jenna didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat. She simply said, "I'm not here to be your boss. I'm here to be your teammate. This isn't a company anymore. It's a crew. And we're going to prove that respect isn't handed down from a title. It's earned mile by mile, job by job." Applause rose, hesitant at first. Then louder, stronger. The union rep nodded. Several drivers stepped forward and shook her hand. She got to work immediately. Training programs were reinstated, with veteran instructors and peer mentorship for new hires. Safety protocols were overhauled. Bonuses were tied to reliability and teamwork, not favoritism. Female drivers, older veterans, and young apprentices all found room to grow in the new Iron Wheel. She invited truckers who had once been blacklisted for petty infractions, some by the very managers she'd fired, to return under new terms. Equal footing, no backroom deals, no sabotage. And as for those former managers, the DOT's investigation wrapped quickly. Fraud, negligence, and tampering with vehicle safety logs had consequences. Their commercial licenses were revoked. Permanently. Some tried to deny it. Others blamed Jenna. But the truth was too public to bury. And Jenna never once spoke their names again. Weeks later, under the open sky and the rumble of freshly tuned engines, Jenna stood at the front of her new crew, a group of drivers in worn boots, patch-covered jackets, and sun-wrinkled hands. Iron Wheel rigs gleamed behind them. Not spotless showpieces, but real machines ready to roll. A young driver stepped forward, barely 22, fresh out of trucking school, and asked, "Are you really the woman who drove a tank through a corporate gate?" Jenna smiled. "I drove what I needed to drive, just like you'll do one day." They laughed, and then they hit the road. Because for Jenna, the mission wasn't revenge. It was rebuilding something that could carry the weight of real people, just like those old M1070s did in the sand. And this time, she wasn't just commanding the convoy. She was driving with them. This story reminds us that real strength isn't loud. It's proven under pressure. If you were Jenna, would you have walked away or driven through the gate? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey, where every mile tells a deeper story. See you in the next video.